Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Tarek Khalil, and I'm the Education Coordinator with the American Muslims for Palestine. It's an honor for me to be hosting this 9th educational webinar titled Israel's Crimes in Sheikh Jarrah, Al-Aqsa, and Gaza. The Nakba continues. As the world's 1.8 billion Muslim population, we're set to celebrate Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power. Their beloved Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem was desecrated by the Israeli army and mobs. This invasion by Israel, which included forcible confiscation of Palestinian-owned dwellings in East Jerusalem, specifically in Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, was followed by a ferocious bombing of Gaza. These May 2021 atrocities are yet another chapter of Al-Nakba, the catastrophe, which is a culmination of a colonization process dating back to 1882 and reached its eventual climax on May 15, 1948, when Israel declared statehood. The forcible displacement and ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Palestinians from 1947 to 1949 created the space for the establishment of Israel in 78% of historic Palestine. Immediately after the mass expulsion and dispossession, the Judaization, Hebraicization, and de-Arabization of Palestine's landscape accelerated. Depopulated villages were bulldozed and concealed by building new settlements, planting forests, and turning them into natural parks. Many visitors, and even ordinary Jewish families who now enjoy these parks, have no idea about the bloody history underneath their feet. And now to our panel. We have with us right now, we have Rawan Aldamen, a Palestinian filmmaker and media consultant, the CEO and founder of Stream Media Consultancy. She's a policy member of Al-Shabaka and a board member of ARIJ, Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism, and board member of Palestine International Forum for Media and Communications, and jury member of Media Creativity Award for Palestine. She produced and directed more than 30 hours of TV documentaries, translated to multiple languages, including the internationally renowned award-winning documentary series Al-Nakba, which I recommend everybody to see. Rawan worked as a senior commissioning producer of Al Jazeera Media Network for 10 years, working with tens of documentary filmmakers. She founded and led teams on multiple digital platforms, notably the innovative project Palestine Remix. She received the Media Creativity Award by the Arab Thought Foundation in Beirut in December of 2015. Also with us, we have Manal Shqair, the International Outreach Coordinator of the Land Defense Coalition, an umbrella of grassroots organizations based in Palestine, of which Stop the Wall campaign, which she as a member will be representing today. And we will also have on, oh, we got him right now. Assalamu alaikum, Mahmoud.
Alaikum assalam. Hi, how are you?
That's Mahmoud Shark, Palestinian activist in Gaza, who will share his perspective on this topic and, of course, the recent events of the last 2 weeks. And later on in the program, about half hour or so in, we will have esteemed historian Dr. Ilan Pappe. He is an Israeli historian and activist. He's a professor with the College of Social Sciences and International Studies at the University of Exeter, director of the university's European Center for Palestine Studies, and co-director of the Exeter Center for Ethnopolitical Studies. He's written many, many books on Israel, Palestine, and the Middle East, including The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, The Biggest Prison on Earth, A History of the Occupied Territories, and the 10 Myths About Israel. Rawan, I wanna start off with you, because I know you have to leave us in about half hour to 40 minutes. What is your conceptualization of the Nakba and what it means today, and why do we refer to it as an ongoing project and not just some singular event that occurred in 1948?
Thank you very much, Tarek, and thanks to AMP for this organization in this important time. We are witnessing a change in the understanding of the Palestinian narrative in the States, in Europe, in the West, and that's very encouraging to us who have been working on this narrative for years. I think Al-Nakba didn't start in 1948. It started many, many years before, even centuries before. But politically, let's talk about the modern history of Palestine, and let's talk about 100 years ago. In 1920, the Herbert Samuel, the first British High Commissioner of Palestine, came. He was the same Zionist mentality and mind that wrote the Future of Palestine, a secret document during the World War I in 1915. He wrote these 6 pages that were secret at that time, entitled The Future of Palestine, where he made it very clear that this piece of land will be colonized and we will get Jewish migrants, Zionists, to this region and plant them among Palestinians, and then talking seriously about ethnic cleansing without mentioning the word ethnic cleansing. He himself was appointed by the colonization at that time to be the first High Commissioner of Palestine. We are talking about 100 years ago. When he arrived, the day he arrived, Major General Sir Louis Balls, who was the military in charge of Palestine, asked him to sign a paper. He said, I will not leave Palestine and give you the charge of Palestine unless you sign a paper that you got Palestine, one Palestine, comma, complete. That was the whole of the paper. One Palestine, comma, complete. Herbert Samuel refused to sign this paper because the whole Zionist idea was not one Palestine, but to divide Palestine. They knew at that time, they knew that they don't have the full capacity to take the whole of Palestine. In the project, it's not only the whole of historic Palestine, but many other parts of the Arab world that were included in the project, in the vision of Zionism, that we think that is still until today. The target is the whole area of the Arab world and not only Palestine. But at that time, Herbert Samuel refused to sign this paper because it's an obligation. You received Palestine as one piece. And then Major General Sir Louis Balls said, I will not leave unless you sign this paper. So he signed and he added the letters E and EO, which means errors and omissions expected. Errors and omissions. And it's the same mentality of Zionism today, that they sign, they do these deals, but always they are not full signing of what's happening. And 100 years from that time, now in 2021, we are having a continuous Nakba. The Nakba did not end. So it didn't start in 1948, but it didn't end. It's a present reality of executing ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And at the same time, there is the resistance of ethnic cleansing that started also early from the 1920s until today. In the whole of this, the right of return is core in this Nakba, because people, Palestinians, around 1 million Palestinians lost not only their homes, properties, lands, but their whole civilization and memories. They lost the books, the photos, the community. They lost everything. And the Zionist project refused for Palestinians in their children and grandchildren to come back to Palestine. So the right of return is not allowed even now. And this makes it extremely complicated. Just to give a small idea so people will understand how much this is harsh. A city like Haifa, in 1948, it had 70,000 people. Only 3,000 remained. Those who remained in Palestine, you know, they lost everything. They lost the neighbors, they lost their businesses, they lost the connections, the memories, the roots. And the refugees became refugees outside of historic Palestine, some in the West Bank, many in Gaza Strip, in the Arab countries around, even to the States and to Chile. And many of them have experienced the second time refugees. So Palestinians in Syria, in Iraq, they ended up now in Norway, in Sweden. So the Nakba in reality didn't stop because the ethnic cleansing didn't stop. And only in the last 2 weeks, killing Palestinians in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, trying to confiscate the lands and the homes, and bombarding Gaza Strip, and the killing of Palestinians, even Palestinians, Israelis, Palestinians who have Israeli passports, who live within Israel. The 160,000 people who remained in 1948 are now over 2 million people. And the core is that they are having the discrimination continuous every single day because they are Palestinians. This makes this Nakba very complicated because it never ends, and the Zionist project never ends. It's the continuous idea of confiscating the full of the land and getting rid of the Palestinians, the people, the original native people of the land. And this ethnic cleansing project is extremely planned. It has in its sense the full apartheid and the full racism. The good thing that the Israelis always wanted to hide those crimes and to say that it's not a colonial settler project. But nowadays, with all the alternative media and the social media, it's very clear that the narrative that the Palestinians made clear through oral history and through small pockets in Arabic language is advancing in English language and many languages in Europe, and it's getting its ground and it's hitting Zionists in their face.
Wow, thank you so much, Rawan Aldamen, for that historical perspective. I mean, that really does highlight the fact that from its inception, political Zionism was meant to be an ongoing project to achieve particular goals. And you know, you had different strands within Zionism, but essentially the mainstream strand was an incremental approach. We'll take this, and then slowly and surely we'll get to that eventual conquest. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, he accepted those so-called, you know, partition resolutions that was offered in 36 through the Peel Commission and 47 through the UN, only as a base for furthering Zionist expansionist designs, but not as a final resolution where we're going to live in peace and coexistence and everything is all beautiful after that.
Always it's greedy and gradual, and until now, Israel as a state did not announce its borders. It has been created in 1948. Until this moment, 73 years later, there are no borders. And why is that? Because it's still the same. Greedy and gradual, more and more. So when people talk about two-state solution, the two-state solution is refused by the Zionists long ago, and they made everything to kill this via the settlements, the illegal settlements in East Jerusalem, in the West Bank, because they always wanted more and more. And more means that it's on the expenses of the lives and the memories and the dignity of the Palestinians who live there. And that's the core. We have two people, you know, living in Ramallah and in Gaza, witnessing every single day this. So it's a reality that is going on. And as Tarek said, you know, I advise anybody who would like to know the full history to go into palambassador.org, where they will find Al-Nakba documentary, Owners of the Land documentary series about Palestinians within Israel, and then everything around, you know, the false hopes of peace and this thing that Israel wants to do a peace, because we have seen it, we have experienced it, and advise everybody to look on the Price of Oslo documentary. It's also available in Arabic, English, and Spanish on palambassador.org, and check for yourselves what Israelis, Palestinians, and international experts say. I think now anybody who says, I don't know, I don't understand, the time is, we cannot accept this anymore. Now we know. In 1920, everything was secret. All those documents were secret. All those plans were secret. So people didn't know. But now we have the documents and we have the facts on the ground and we know what's happening.
And for those that have not watched the Nakba documentary, please do. And if you are not like me and you can't sit for 4 hours to watch a documentary, you can watch it in pieces, you know, throughout the week. A lot of great information, great detail. And I actually used that Nakba in lectures that I've done. It's a great documentary, and I definitely recommend it to our audience. And those that are not watching as well. Now, the Nakba plays out in various ways and with various degrees of intensity. So for instance, the Bedouin in the Nakba, for instance, experienced ethnic cleansing and oppression through different governmental machinations than Palestinians, for instance, in East Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah being a primary example. Now, we can't look at Israel's apartheid rule in isolation because the Palestinian people as a whole, as a collective, are the target. However, each individual example does provide a microcosm of a Nakba. So, Manal, I want to turn to you to discuss the events in Humza in the Jordan Valley and how this fits into Israel's larger campaign of expansionism, annexation, and ethnic cleansing. Please take it away.
Mm-hmm. Thank you a lot, Tarek. Thank you also for inviting me to speak in this interesting event. Before I start, please feel free to stop me because I feel that I have a lot to say, so I want to be mindful of time. I totally agree with what Rawan has just said, that our Nakba did not start in 1948, as people usually say, or keep repeating. 1948 is the culmination of our Nakba that started more than a century ago. So Israeli practices of ethnic cleansing are a continuation of past ethnic cleansing to forge a future that was envisaged by the Zionist movement more than a century ago. And that future is the creation of a state exclusively for the Jewish people, and empty of its Palestinian people, because the existence of the Palestinian people in that space, the geographical space that Israel wants to make it part of its Jewish state, is seen as detrimental to this constructed ethnic homogeneity. So we are seen as a contamination of the so-called purity of that Jewish state. And as you said, like the ethnic cleansing of Palestine takes different forms by implementing different tools in order to ethnically cleanse more and more Palestinians, depending on the legal framework subjugating us, either annexed Jerusalem, occupied West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, or Palestinian third-class citizens of Israel. To start with Humza, Humza is located in the north of the Jordan Valley, which is in occupied West Bank, and it is classified according to international law an occupied territory. So Humza is among several Bedouin communities in the Jordan Valley threatened with Israeli ethnic cleansing. I mean, in previous years, it was totally destroyed by the Israeli occupation forces. And last November, the property of the 11 families were reduced to rubble totally. And then because the families stayed steadfast on their land and refused to leave it, the Israeli occupation forces returned back again last February, and in one month it was bulldozed 5 times. Now there is no further demolition has taken place since February, but at the same time the community is not allowed to rebuild their property and their houses or residential tents, because they are not even allowed to build houses, so they live in tents. And at the same time, in order to force them out of their homes, the Israeli occupation forces has intensified the already existing water apartheid practices against them. Since the start of March, Palestinians in Humza, 11 families, are not allowed access to water. Actually, since decade, Israel has been denying the Bedouin communities in the Jordan Valley connection to the grid, to the water grid that provides water to Israeli settlements. So they depend on water transferred by using tractors. since more than 2 months, the Israeli occupation restricts the transfer of tanked water, and the community has ended up smuggling water. And every night, the Israeli occupation forces raid the community in search of any newly transferred water tanks. And if they find any, they confiscate the tractors. And if the community wants to get the tractors back, they have to pay fines. And so these kinds of restrictions are clearly aimed at ethnically cleansing the community from their homes. In addition to Hamza, I would also like to talk about what is happening in Jerusalem. In addition to Sheikh Jarrah, Israel now is preparing for mass ethnic cleansing of the two neighborhoods of Batn al-Hawa and Al-Bustan in Silwan, which is located 300 kilometers 300 kilometers away from the old city of Jerusalem. So we've launched a campaign, and that campaign is aimed at supporting Silwan and more than 1,000 people living in Silwan who are facing the imminent ethnic cleansing. If we have time, I can talk more about what is happening and about the uprising, because I would really love to share with you my thoughts on the uprising. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Manal, for that. I mean, we really need that perspective in these isolated areas throughout all of historic Palestine, especially in the Jordan Valley. You provided us with a short video that I would like our audience to watch, and this is regarding the situation that you just discussed. So if we can please pull that up so that the audience can watch it, and then we'll return back to the program.
بشارات أبو صقر، عضو مجلس المالح والمضارب البدوية. أنا الممثل عن التجمعات البقاع الشرقية. احنا موجودين هسه الوقت الحاضر في مضارب كركة قنطرة اللي هدمها الاحتلال من قبل أشهر. لهذا اليوم المعاناة والمرار، وإحنا أطفالنا وجميع ما نملك، وما حدا عملنا شيء. أجت فزعات مثل هبات الريح، مؤسسات دولية ومناصر دوليين ومناصر الدول الأوروبية وتأملنا خير، ولكن للأسف اللي اكتشفناه إنه المجتمع الدولي هو اللي مرسخ الاحتلال علينا، لأنه ولا يمكن تدخل راس عاقل إنه المجتمع الدولي مش قادر يمون على جرثومة مثل إسرائيل إنها ما تأكلش حقوقنا وتعمل جرائم حرب فينا، تخلي أطفالنا وأغنامنا ومرزقنا كلياتها في مهب الريح. حتى المية اللي هي عمود الحياة، والمية مسموحة للجميع ربانيا وأخلاقيا وقانونيا، ممنوع علينا وما بنجيبهاش إلا في السرقة.
Save Sheikh Jarrah, save Hamza, safe.
Yeah, I think Tarek, if I want just to comment on this very strong video, you know, and
Please.
that it's very problematic that the world doesn't know that every single place of Palestine is targeted. So Homsa village is targeted, Sheikh Jarrah is targeted, the Al-Ajami neighborhood in Jaffa is targeted, Gaza is targeted. And in this last 2 weeks, I think what gave me a bit of hope that all of historic Palestine and all people who believe in justice around the world, all of them said, we are all Sheikh Jarrah. And it means a lot, you know, because it is not about Sheikh Jarrah only, or Jerusalem only, or Hamsa only, or Jaffa only, or Nazareth, or Gaza. That the project targets the whole of historic Palestine, and only those who understand this and believe in justice. In the whole of the Arab world, we had demonstrations pro-Palestine, even in refugee camps, Syrian refugee camps in Idlib, and in Baghdad, and in Doha, and in Morocco, and in Berlin, and London, and DC, and Chicago, and Boston, because all of those people believe that we are all Sheikh Jarrah and we are all targeted, because if it is injustice anywhere, it's a threat to justice everywhere.
Dr. Martin Luther King. It's my favorite. That's one of my favorite quotes of all time. And I would like to briefly comment, and I'll give the floor to anybody else that wants to comment on it. I mean, this is the reason why I feel like we need to fight even harder in the diaspora, is because of that gentleman there who said that the international community is not really doing anything. I mean, I consider myself part of that community. I'm Palestinian. I belong to the people of Palestine. I belong to Palestine, but I'm not living what that man is living. So I want them to know that we are here for them, and that we are fighting for them, and that we do care about them. And another quick takeaway from that is, you know, there are things that we take for granted. So, you know, sometimes I'll throw water on the ground if it's been there for more than an hour, and I'll just get a brand new bottle. And then I think to myself, you know, we take water for granted, you know, and you have people in Palestine who have to literally count the amount of water that they can use on a daily basis. Nobody should be living like that. But our tax dollars here in the US go towards sustaining that. So that's what gives me inspiration. That's what gives me strength. That's what allows me to continue to fight for justice and liberation in Palestine. Manal or Mahmoud, we're gonna get to you next on a specific question. But if any of you want to comment further on that, please do.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize what Rawan has just said, that Sheikh Jarrah is not an isolated case, because every part of Palestine where there is still a Palestinian existence, there is targeted by Israel's settler colonial project. And I always say that if we succeed in saving Sheikh Jarrah or saving Homsa, this is a proof that, we're gonna make it hard, or even harder, for Israel to break the other communities and to ethnically cleanse the other communities. So Homsa stands for all the other communities, and even for the remainder of Palestine where there is still Palestinian existence. Once Israel breaks that community, it's gonna move to the next one. And commenting on the water apartheid thing, actually, Israeli practices of water apartheid in the West Bank is affecting the Gaza Strip, because historically the water of people in Gaza used to depend on water flowing from the hills of the West Bank, particularly the south part of the West Bank. So Israel, since years, blocked that flow of water and diverted this water to the settlement. So water apartheid in the West Bank, just to show you how every part in Palestine or Israeli practice affect every part of Palestine, including the blockaded Gaza Strip. So water apartheid in the West Bank does not only harm us in the West Bank, but it also intensifies or entrenches the blockade imposed on Gaza since years. Yeah, that's my comment. I would like to hear more from Mahmoud about the situation in Gaza.
Mahmoud, I'm so glad you agreed to come on and share your perspective. Look, we just had a ceasefire, but we had a ceasefire in 2008. We had a ceasefire in 2012. We had a ceasefire in 2014. And now we have a ceasefire in 2021. Ceasefires are temporary. Gaza is
Absolutely.
there's still a blockade of Gaza. I want you to speak to your experience the past 2 weeks, and of course, I want you to comment on the Nakba as an ongoing project and talk about Gaza specifically. So please, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Well, my name is Mahmoud, and I'm from Gaza, and I'm 18 years old. And we here in Gaza, if you're 18, that means that, well, starting yesterday, you just survived your fourth war. And it's just so bizarre to even think that something like that is happening on this planet. The past couple of weeks here in Gaza, so the previous war that just ended or just paused was one of the shorter ones, the shortest wars on Gaza, but it was probably one of the most brutal wars on Gaza. And I've been posting a lot on my Facebook feed about, I've been just giving out daily updates. And at one point, I was just, losing energy because I wasn't able to sleep for days, and I mean days. And even when I do, I would just sleep for like 30 minutes, and I would wake up to some bombing around me in the area, which is really loud, and you can not only hear him, but you can feel him and see him as well, especially if it's in the middle of the night. For one split of a second after midnight, the whole sky of Gaza would just lit up for one split of a second, which is scary. And I wanted to talk. And here's the thing: I survived through these wars, 4 wars on Gaza, and I wouldn't dare to say that I was suffering, because I have seen the real suffering of people here in Gaza, people who lost their homes, their houses, their residential buildings, their lives of their beloved ones. So, like, I feel like despite everything that I personally have been through, I count myself as lucky, and I count myself as someone who hasn't really seen it all. But I was there to watch it happening in Gaza. Another thing I wanted to say, and I've been talking about it, and I hasn't shut up about it ever since it happened. So we declared when things got real messy in Gaza, the Zionist occupation asked for a ceasefire, but an unconditional one. And that's where the Palestinian resistance movements jumped and was like, oh no, there are going to be conditions. And one of the main conditions, and probably the first one, was that the Israeli forces are not allowed to attack the worshippers who go to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's just that the first one, it's why we got into the war in the first place. Okay. And so, the ceasefire was agreed on and agreed upon. 10 hours into the ceasefire, the Israeli forces invaded the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they started attacking the worshippers, shooting rubber bullets and gas tearing people. And it's just like, I was like, what do we do now in Gaza? We had a ceasefire. It was broken by the other end, and so are we supposed to stay silent about our oppression? And I started, shooting questions left and right, and especially to those who support the apartheid state of Israel. What would you do if you were in our shoes? Would you stay silent about your oppression, or would you pick up where you left and start fighting for it again? And another thing that I wanted to say, and it happened literally yesterday. My nephew, they bombed and destroyed a house next to their house. Okay, so last night, all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, he started crying and he started calling his mom, and we were all around him, and he was like half asleep. He wasn't fully conscious, but he was shaking, and he was like, violently moving his hands and legs left and right, and he was sweating so hard, and I don't know what was happening to him, but his mom said that it was probably because of the really loud explosion that happened next to him the other night. And it's like, from my point of view, I was 1 year older than him when I had to survive through my first war in Gaza. It was 2008, and I was 6 years old. So I don't have lots of memories, but I really remember how it's like to be scared just from the sound of a warplane flying by. And there are no really, like, we cannot really depend on certain organizations in Gaza to provide mental health. It does exist, but it's not as as much as we hope for it to be in Gaza. So it's just, my nephew has been traumatized, and I've been traumatized myself 4 times, and now I'm trying to heal again. And we survived through it, what a lot of other people weren't really lucky enough to do.
Mahmoud, I mean, I've lived as an adult throughout the past few massacres. I think my activism really picked up with Operation Cast Lead. You were 6 or 7 at that time, I believe, then, if that's the case. So, I mean, you went through the most brutal ones, and you've definitely experienced them all. What is the atmosphere like in Gaza right now? Because now there's rebuilding efforts, and there's been a lot of demolitions, and there's homelessness. And when we talk about refugees, there are refugees that are doubly displaced, thricely displaced, and it's not just one-time displacement, and then now they're living in one piece of territory. They're displaced constantly after these events occur, and picking people up out of the rubble. I mean, it's the human side of it is what really gets me. And what I saw that I think was just a sign of hope these last 2 weeks was not just the unity among the Palestinians. And when I say unity among the Palestinians, I'm talking about all of Palestine. I mean, even within the 48 territories, or what is Israel proper. I mean, you have this connection. It's not we're a separate people living in a separate state, but that's how the Zionist movement loves to portray those Palestinians, and that's why they refer to them within the context of their ethnicity rather than their nationality, and that's why they're referred to, and I know Rawan's shaking her head, as Arab Israelis or Israeli Arabs and not Palestinians, because those are the Duffa people, the West Bank people, and the Gaza people, and the refugees that are living in Beirut or Yarmouk or wherever. That's a different population, a different people altogether, and it's that unity.
Even they tried Tarek with the Christian Palestinians, with Druze,
Yes,
with Muslims, with the sectarian, with young, with all generation. Just want to tell Mahmoud, what you are doing in speaking what's happening in Gaza in a very clear way in English language is very, very important. Really salute you, and be sure that many people feel what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza and the suffering that is happening there. And even non-Arabs and non-Muslims are working for the freedom of Gaza and to break the siege. And this has been for years. So be sure there are a lot of people who are by your side. And one of them is my favorite, dear friend, Dr. Ilan Pappe. It's so good to see you.
Same here. Oh, good to see you all. And sorry for being late, but I was on another webinar and it extended longer than we thought.
No, it's okay. You came Arab Standard Time, just right on time right now. So you're good. You're good. Don't worry. I just wanted fill you in. I already introduced you with your bio. Trust me, I said all the good things.
I'm
mean,
sure, Tarek.
It's all good anyway. And right now we just left off speaking with Mahmoud, who is in Gaza, and who just told us about the last 2 weeks and his experience. He's 18 years old. He experienced since he was 7 years old the last 4 major operations: 2008, 12, 14, and now. And now that you're here, Dr. Pappe, I would like you to just kind of connect a lot of these dots for us. We're talking about the Nakba as an ongoing project and not just some singular event, and that you can say climaxed in 1948 and that was it. And now we're just living in the decline of that, but we're still living in that climactic scene of a Nakba. And each part of Palestine plays a different role. You have Sheikh Jarrah playing a pivotal role. You have Gaza playing a pivotal role. You have the Palestinians that are living inside Israel playing a pivotal role. You have the refugees playing. So all of this connected, and understanding the Nakba is not just as it is presented in Zionist discourse as some miraculous clearing of the land, but as an orchestrated, meticulous, methodical operation of ethnic cleansing and the destruction of Palestine's landscape. Can you speak to all of that and kind of just summarize and put it all together for us? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. And I'm particularly happy to see Mahmoud, and I hope he can convey to the people of Gaza mine, and I'm sure everybody else's, solidarity with the people there. You're in our hearts, you're in our souls, in our minds, and we'll do all we can from the outside to defend you and help you, and we will not rest for a minute. I also liked your question, Tarek. I think it's important to put things into context, because the same ideology that was behind the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in 1948, that led to the expulsion of half of Palestine's population, the demolition of half of Palestine's villages, and most of the Palestinian towns, the same ideology that also led to dozens of massacres during that act of massive ethnic cleansing, that same ideology is behind the idea of kicking out and expelling the people of Sheikh Jarrah because they are part of an area of Jerusalem that the Israeli governments, not just this one, ever since Israel occupied Sheikh Jarrah in 1967, want to see as a Jewish neighborhood, and are doing all they can to Judaize not just Sheikh Jarrah, but all the East Jerusalem, and make it a pure Jewish space. It's the same ideology that sent the troops of the Israeli border police into Haram al-Sharif, and some of them with their boots into Qubat al-Sahra. And it's the same ideology that sees the people who live in Gaza, the 2 million people who live in Gaza, as collateral damage, as they would call it, a dehumanization of people who are already in 2020, according to the United Nations, were not able to sustain normal standard of living or level of living. So it is important all the time to explain this concept of, of the ongoing Nakba, Nakba al-Mustamirra. It's very important because it means we are in the same historical chapter. We are in a chapter that began in the late 19th century and has not ended as yet, because we are facing a settler colonial movement that created a settler colonial state in 1948 and regards all the Palestinians. It doesn't matter whether they are citizens of Israel, trapped in the ghetto in Gaza or in Sheikh Jarrah. It regards all of them aliens that have to be removed in order to fulfill the project. The means have changed over time. Sometimes it's a massive operation. Sometimes it's a very incremental individual operation, but it has not stopped for a moment. And I think what it tells us two things. And with this, I would end this particular answer. It tells us, on the one hand, that even if the Israelis, like a typical colonial power, were trying to employ policies of divide and rule by saying it's better to be a Palestinian in Israel than to be a Palestinian in the West Bank, than to be a Palestinian in Jerusalem, creating this kind of privileges in order to induce people to be so-called good Arabs. Despite these policies of fragmentation, they themselves could not uphold the racist embedded in the Zionist ideology. And I think, and this is the second thing we have seen, that the younger generation of Palestinians, whether they are in Haifa, whether they are in Jerusalem, in al-Fahim, in the Nakba, in Gaza, I think they understand better than anyone before that are part of the same nation, of the same people, and whatever happens to one group of Palestinians is happening to them. And above that, I've never seen such an international solidarity feeling the same, although nobody was hurt in New York or in Amsterdam or in Durban or in Karachi or Delhi. But the sense that people felt that the attack of Gaza is attack also on their humanity means that we have a rare moment of opportunity with the civil societies of the world finally using the right language to explain what happening there, using the right means of solidarity. And I think we should take out of the misery and pain and the suffering and the barbarism also some hope that we are able to create a movement on the ground and a solidarity movement from the outside that will not give in, even if they're facing such a powerful military state.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Pappe. And just a quick question. I saw on your social media your book, Ethnic Cleansing, that was written, what, 17 years ago or something, is sold out or something like that? Like people are buying it crazy the past couple of weeks. What's going on there?
Yes, both in Arabic and in English. I hope I hope the leaders of Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, and Morocco are reading it finally, because I don't think they ever read the book or something similar to it. But yes, there's an amazing growth in interest. And I think part of it is evident to what I said before, that we were struggling for years for people not to call it a conflict, to call it colonialism, not to look for a peace process, but to look for decolonization, not to call it the only democracy in the Middle East, but an apartheid state. And I think the interest of a book like this and similar books, of course, it's not the only one that is there, means that people understand that they need both the context and the vocabulary, the dictionary, in order to be able both to understand and to know exactly what they are supporting, what are they showing solidarity with. And I think a lot of younger people in the Arab world also need to learn about the Nakba. I don't think it's being taught by many educational systems and in the Arab world. So I'm very happy also to see a growing interest in the Arab world in the book and in the history of the Nakba, and understanding the connection between what happened in 48 and what happened last week in Jerusalem, inside historical Palestine, and in Gaza.
You also wrote another book called the 10 Myths, and one interesting aspect behind the Zionist myths as a whole is that it focuses on deception, half-truths, kind of a mythical history, and this kind of reinterpretation of biblical events. And one interesting thing that you mentioned, I think in an interview, I'm not sure, but the founding fathers of Zionism did not believe in God, but believed that God gave them the land, or something to that effect. And I'm still hearing that today. So, for instance, Naftali Bennett, who former education minister, he comes on the news a lot and repeats that same tired slogan. Look in the Bible. That's how old Israel is. We'll never give up our land. We'll never give. So the trend that I'm seeing right now is now that there's a humanization of the Palestinian people. and we're moving away from the dehumanization of the Palestinians. Even here in the U.S., we have congressional members putting forth resolutions, historic resolutions to block a weapons sale to Israel. I mean, I didn't think, honestly, I'm not an old guy, but I didn't think I would live to see that. And the fact that we're witnessing that, I think is amazing. Can you speak to this worldwide trend that we're moving in right now? That yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Tarek. Yes, 2 points here. One, you're right. This narrative that claims that because you can, if you want, to interpret the Old Testament, the Bible, as if it is a kind of a kushan, namely a promise from God to the Jewish people to have ownership forever on Palestine, is something that, as you know, proper Orthodox Jews never accepted. That's why we have so many ultra-Orthodox Jews who are anti-Zionists. They never interpreted the Bible as a book that is a political program for taking over Palestine. They see the Bible as a moral guide of how the faithful should treat each other and their relationship with God. That's what the Bible is about. Now came a secular settler colonial movement named Zionism in the late 19th century, encouraged, by the way, by fundamentalist Christians who were both anti-Semitic, wanted to kick the Jews out of Europe and America, and that's why they supported the colonization of Palestine, and also believed that the return of the Jews will bring back Jesus Christ and so on. Not all the Christians, of course, but a certain stream in Christianity. So together they concocted this fabrication as if the Bible is the proof that Palestine belongs to the Jewish people. And the interesting thing, that's what you pointed out to, that the people among the Jews who pushed this forward were secular Jews, atheist Jews who did not believe in God. And they used the Bible without any reverence to the book as a holy book, but rather as a propaganda book that allows them to take over. The trend that you're talking about is the trend I was talking about before. The ability today, because we have so much literature, there's so many people who visited the place, there's so many articulate young Palestinians like Mahmoud, that it's impossible not to hear the truth. I have a good friend, a Palestinian friend, who says that when it comes to the truth, the Palestinians have nothing to lose. And I think that's what we are witnessing, that the truth is coming out, and anybody with a modicum of decency in them cannot stay indifferent. And you know, I just read the other day in the New York Times that they are surprised that so many, it was yesterday, that so many young Jews found it very difficult in America to identify with Israel in this particular assault on Gaza. It's not surprising. Whether you are a Jew, a Buddhist, a Muslim, or a Christian, if you have a modicum of decency in you, you see now the picture for what it is. You don't need my book to understand who is the colonizer, who is the colonized, who is the ethnic cleanser, who is the one who is a victim of ethnic cleansing, and that we are seeing, as we have seen for many years, a struggle between an anti-colonialist movement and a colonialist power. And I think that some clarity is there now, which explains that it's easier to galvanize public opinion, which hopefully one day will influence also policies from above.
I would like to comment on what Dr. has been discussing. First, nice to meet you. I really always wanted to meet you, especially to thank you for writing The Idea of Israel, because this book has given me more understanding of how the idea of Israel and even the ideology of Zionism has evolved, where I noticed that at the center of Zionism, its doctrine, there always have been racism. There always have been the superior and inferior dichotomy, and And this made me figure out what the cracks in this project are, what the cracks in Israel's visible and invisible walls of discrimination, walls of exclusion, and walls of apartheid are. And I do think that the current uprising across Palestine, especially in 48 Palestine and in the West Bank, and the resistance in Gaza, of course, are these cracks, and these cracks are deepening. And by these cracks, I mean the human drive. It's the human drive in us for justice, the human drive for freedom, the human drive for self-determination. And these rights, we've been denied all of these rights since decades. I mean, as a Palestinian, I was born without even tasting what it means to be free, without I always hear about self-determination, but I've never experienced it. And actually yesterday Benjamin Netanyahu was giving a speech about their assault, their brutal and savage assault on Gaza and the ceasefire, and he was proudly talking about these walls and how he still thinks that he wants to fortify these walls more around Gaza. He called them smart walls. And I do think in this way, the Israelis, Netanyahu, and the Israeli colonizers, they deny us our humanity in two different ways. First, when they inflict on us oppression, when they deny us the basic of our rights. And then when we resist, because where there's Michel Foucault once said, when we resist, because just because we are humans, we don't accept dehumanization. And when we resist, they try to stifle this resistance. They try to repress it. And this is another way of dehumanizing us more. So I do think that even if Israel wants to fix the cracks in its walls, it's gonna fail, because the more we are oppressed, the more we long for freedom, the more we long for our humanity. So yeah, that's the thing that I wanted to comment on. And as you said, the young generation in 48 Palestine has shown how Israeli plans and even relentless efforts to alienate them from the rest of the Palestinian people are just falling apart. I mean, Israel, for instance, through its education system, has been trying to make Palestinians in 48 to internalize Israeli Jews are them, and this is alienation where they are less inclined to affiliate with their Palestinian identity is a way for Israel to impose on them assimilation, not impose them within the population, the Israeli population, but the assimilation that is aimed at making them act as the good natives, disrupted through the demonstrations that Palestinians in 48 Palestine, they just took to the streets simply through all of the stereotypical images perpetuating their inferiority, and they just emphasize their unity with the rest of the Palestinian people, and they embrace their identity, which has been distorted by Israel since decades. Thank you.
Hi, first of all, Dr. Pappe, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I just wanted you to know that. There are actually a few comments that I have on a few of the things that have been said. I'm gonna start with what Manal said about Benjamin Netanyahu going on, to the Israeli press and saying that, and actually watching it myself, all these buildings that have been, leveled with the ground, have all been empty, and it just surprised to everyone, just playing on the channels and all that stuff. And it reminded me of another thing that I wanted to talk about is the young Jews in the United States who have been having hard time accepting the idea of the state of Israel. And I think at one point after, I think after the 2014 war, I started thinking to myself, because I was watching lots of, U.S. channels and Western media platforms. So I got to a point where I wanted to question, am I actually really on the right side? Why are we here stuck in Gaza? We must have done something wrong. Okay. And I think it's okay for anyone to question the things that have been fed to him growing up. Okay. And I think everybody should do that. But everything that I found was, historically, and reading lots of books, and actually asking my dad about it, for him to come with actual resources instead of just telling me stories, was that, after the United Kingdom taking over Palestine and going back in history. And I have gained so much. I regained my beliefs in my right to return to my home and the right of Palestine and illegitimacy of Israel. And again, I think it's okay for anybody to question the things that has been fed to him or to them growing up. It's just the most important thing is for them to grow to see the right thing, which is when I see videos of Israeli Defense Forces soldiers speaking up about how they changed their views, and now that they have left Israel and they don't want to live it anymore, and they speak up about the crimes that the Israeli Defense Forces has been committing against Palestinians, it gives me hope. Honestly, it really does. And it's just a lot of things like that gives hopes to us in Gaza, especially because uh, for me to be an 18 years old young man and to just dream about going to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque, it's just ridiculous, honestly. And I was actually fortunate to go on an exchange year. I was an exchange student. I went to the United States for one academic year, and I met a lot of people, and for them to come see me in Gaza is absolutely impossible, including my host family who hosted me for 1 year. And they've been, we've been talking, forth and back about what if they could, like, we were so desperate that they offered to come to Tel Aviv so I could come see them. And I actually told them that it's actually impossible, because it took us, like the group of Palestinian students in Gaza, it took us around 11 days to go, to the United States, because we had to go through military checkpoints all the way from Gaza to Jordan. And we had to get about 4 permissions from 4 different governments to be able to leave. And not all of us made it, by the way. And when we wanted to go to Jerusalem to have our visa interviews and obtain our US visas, we were denied entry to Jerusalem, and we had to go to another country. We had to go to Jordan to go to the US embassy in Jordan and get our visas and obtain our visas. And it's all stuff like that that's been kind of suffocating us. Not kind of, it's been suffocating us in Gaza. And uh, it makes us, all of that is happening to make us weaker. But whenever we receive such support and such love from people, and they speak up about everything that's been happening in Palestine, it gives us strength to keep doing it, stay alive and keep kicking.
Mahmoud, thank you for that so much. And put your thumb up. Put your thumb up if I'm right on this. Was that Adan behind you that I was hearing while you were talking?
Al-Adhan, yeah, that's Al-Isha Adhan.
See, I miss this stuff. These are the things I love waking up to. But Alhamdulillah, inshallah, soon we'll be able to do that in a free Palestine, inshallah. Now, something that you hit on, Mahmoud, that I want to stress. I think there's a lot of people in the, I guess you can say, I mean, this is a worldwide thing, but it's definitely a pervasive understanding here in the U.S. is that once the flare-ups kind of subside, they think that everything is back to just normal life and everybody's living okay. And once these flare-ups occur again, that's where the problem is. But once the flare-up is, like right now, I'm sure there's many people in the U.S. that believe now everybody's going to work, everything is fine, and everything's back to normal, and we'll see what happens next. Who fires the first rocket, and then whoever fires the first rocket, that's the one who started it. It's just this very simplistic way of understanding what is the actual realities on the ground. And this is the problem. That's why yesterday we had a protest in Chicago after the ceasefire occurred, because the messaging that came with that protest was, end the siege on Gaza now. There's still a siege. Free Palestine. Palestine is still not free. So I mean, the slogans still have meaning. They're not reduced in meaning. Save Sheikh Jarrah. That's one of the chants. Sheikh Jarrah is still under attack. It's been recently declared, unless something happened in the last 24 hours, a military zone. So now the occupation is still entrenching in the West Bank, and in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and in Silwan, my neighborhood, and in Sheikh Jarrah, and of course in Gaza you still have a blockade. So that's really the reality here, is that we need to emphasize that just because the flare-up has subsided, the issue still persists, and we cannot accept the status quo. And that's really the message of yesterday's protest, and I believe all future rallies and protests should have that message in mind, is that there's still an apartheid regime operating throughout historic Palestine. So Professor Pappe, can you speak to that? And also, this idea of settler colonialism, I think, is gaining traction here in the U.S. Even there's some members of Congress who I've spoken to their staff. They wanted resources because the concept is really not a concept that I believe is well understood. Because when I hear this from Zionists a lot, when they talk about colonialism, the way that they defend against that is they say, well, it's not like France and Algeria, where the French are the colonizers and they came and they took resources. Jews are people that fled these brutal oppressors. They came as migrants. How can that be colonialism? But of course, that there's that distinction between the conventional notion and the settler colonial concept as a distinctive concept. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, definitely. I think the comparison is not just to Algeria. The comparison is also to South Africa, and also to the United States and Canada and Australia. I think one thing we should explain to people in the United States, that the fact that we teach for years now that the United States was created by settler colonialism, namely by European, who many of them were persecuted for their religion. They came to someone else's homeland, the Native Americans, and dispossessed them, and in many cases genocided them. Yes, it happened many, many, many years ago, but it still happened. And it's one case study of settler colonialism. That doesn't mean that we are saying to the people who live today in the United States, you should go somewhere. It just means that you want to recognize this settler colonialism and understand what does it mean for a more just society. In Palestine, the difference is, first of all, that it happened relatively recently, and the most important thing, it continues. It continues to happen because the 48 ethnic cleansing was incomplete. And the ideology, as I said, behind that settler colonialism is still at work. And I think it is important to explain to people that the fact that you were yourself a refugee, a Jewish refugee in Europe, does not give you, or even a victim of the Holocaust, does not give you the right to dispossess someone from their homeland. In fact, as I come from a family that on both sides of my parents, we lost most of our family members in the Holocaust. I think that because of that happened to my family, I have to stand by the Palestinian people and what had been done to them. My lesson from that is not that it gives me a license to dispossess the Palestinian, ethnically cleanse them, and in the case of Gaza, pursue an incremental genocidal policy. On the contrary, and I think this is very important message to explain to people, not just bringing them resources, but giving them a picture that they cannot refute. Because however you explain the reasons for why Jews left Europe, and you don't have to argue with the fact that many of them felt insecure, and rightly so, you cannot use it as a justification for the dispossession of the Palestinians. And of course, this is 2021. There are 6 million Jews now in historical Palestine, a third generation of settlers. Yes, I think most Palestinians, even the vast majority of Palestinians, say to these 6 million, yes, you are settlers, but we are not kicking you out, unlike what you want to do to us. But understand, you are part of Palestine. Palestine is part of the Arab world. It's part of the Muslim world, and it should be a democratic country for all. But you will have to give up your privileges. You'll have to be accountable for what you did, and of course, all the refugees who want to come back should be able to return. It is this kind of decolonization that has to be packaged together, rather than the abortive peace plan of 2 states, two Bantustans, one in the West Bank, one in the Gaza Strip, everything that still President Biden and his advisors are speaking of. But we should not give up just the fact that they are not willing to see it yet. We should continue to educate, to inform, because the reality on the ground is on our side. It shows every passing day shows you that there are only 2 options in historical Palestine, not 3 options, which President Biden hopes there are. There are only 2 options. Either we continue, all of us, to live in an apartheid state, and those with the privileges, because they're not Palestinians, have to decide morally what do they do with that privilege. Do they join like the brave whites who joined the ANC in the struggle against that apartheid, or they are enjoying themselves from the privilege that the apartheid is giving them? Or you create, like in apartheid South, like in the post-apartheid South Africa, a democratic state for all, with the return of the refugees. These are the only 2 options. Anybody who thinks that the 2-state solution is kind of a go-between option is deluding themselves. How exactly, what would be the nature of this state is still open for a dialogue. I just want to end by saying I'm part of an initiative which is called the One Democratic State Initiative, Mubadarat al-Dawla al-Wahida. We have people from the Muslim movement. We have people from the Communist Party. We have people from Balad. We have people from Fatah. We have people from the Jabha al-Demokratiya and the Jabha al-Sha'abiyya. All of them. Why? Because we don't feel we have the right to say what would be the nature of the state. What would be the relationship between religion and secular people and so on. We are not there to decide it, but we want that the conversation of the future would focus on one liberated Palestine, that the people of Palestine themselves would decide what kind of state they want, what kind of future they envision. And this is the main purpose of our initiative, which is really gaining a lot of support. We have also a lot of people in Gaza who support us, because we want this to be the hegemonic discourse now. The discourse of decolonization, the creation of one democratic state, and allow the people of Palestine to decide the future and the vision of the future.
I would like to comment on what Dr. Ilan has just said. Yeah, there is an apartheid system in place to fulfill the Zionist settler colonial objectives. And it is important to support the project of decolonization instead of entrenching the project of settler colonization. And here, it is really important. I'm not sure. First, I'm not sure if the Israelis would give up their privileges voluntarily, and this is why I do think to decolonize Palestine, to decolonize the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis, it is important to support the Palestinian anti-colonial struggle. And I think this is the perfect moment to support our anti-colonial struggle, because we've seen recently tremendous amount of support to Gaza, to the uprising, the West Bank, and in 48 Palestine, and in Jerusalem. So I do think it's important to build on the outpour of solidarity, the outpour of anger that we've seen in the streets, and we should start, or we should act strategically and sustainably to do that. And I do think that supporting the BDS is a sustainable way to dismantle Israel's apartheid regime. And it is a way to strengthen this movement. And it's the time also to recognize Israel and to call it for what it is actually is. It's an apartheid regime. And according to that, to activate or to pressure the international community and the UN to reactivate the mechanisms of apartheid in the UN, apartheid in order to hold Israel accountable for its crimes, in order to end Israeli impunity. As Mahmoud mentioned, he's survived 4 brutal assaults on Gaza, and every time there was a ceasefire does not mean that there is blockade in place, does not mean that Israel will not attack Gaza again. Actually, Israel maybe it's developing more and more its weapons in order to massacre more Palestinians in Gaza. So time is now to think of sustainable actions in order to end the blockade in Gaza and in order to dismantle the entire system of apartheid, so that we can see the moment of decolonization that we all dream about. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you, Professor Pappe. Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you, Manal. It's just an amazing time that we're in right now. And I do believe that with with everybody's help, with everybody's contribution, from academics to just activists, to people on the ground, to social media personalities and so on, I believe we all have a major part to play. And I think that, and I grew out of this phase, thankfully. I used to think, how long is this going to take? I mean, how long should we wait? The world should recognize the injustice. And then I learned and I realized, well, the Zionist project is not something that was thought about in one day and achieved in one day. There are decades of colonization that led to planning, that led to meticulous strategic operations that eventually led to the Nakba. And now we're still, and that, as Dr. Pappe said, that settler colonial project still is ongoing and still continues. I just want to thank our panelists, but before we go, I want to tell our audience that we need to go big and we need to go bold right now for Palestinian liberation. Now that a ceasefire has gone into effect, we cannot accept a return to the status quo. We have to use this momentum. And it's time for Israeli settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, military occupation, and blockade to be dismantled now. So AMP, American Muslims for Palestine, launched a new national campaign with a petition to President Biden to sanction Israel now. and calling for a national march on Washington, D.C. on Saturday, May 29th. I want you to visit our page, sanctionisrael.org. It's right there on the screen, sanctionisrael.org for details. Sign our petition, Sanction Israel Now. Ask Congress to co-sponsor AOC, Bernie Sanders resolutions. Join our national march for Palestine in DC on May 29th, and also RSVP for our virtual gathering for Palestine online May 25th. And also, if you want more updates, for more information and following what AMP is doing, and also get the latest scoop on what is happening in Palestine and beyond, I want you to text CJP to the number 833-694-0414. And with that, we conclude this program. I want to thank our wonderful panel, and thank you, Pappe, for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wonderful to see you all.
It's great to see you all. Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you, Manal, and thank you to Rawan Aldamen, who had to leave us. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and free Palestine, inshallah.
Free Palestine. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.